Have you ever wanted to be an artist? Have you ever sat down and thought to yourself, this is the day. This is the day that I create my masterpiece. This is going to be the next Mona Lisa, the thing everyone will remember me by for the next 1,000 years. So you sit down in your room, you hunker down, and after hours and hours of hard work, you turn to see what you have, your masterpiece. It's not very good. But why does it look so bad? Well, I could probably give you a million reasons, but let's try to analyze this from a neuroscience perspective. After all, there really shouldn't be anything wrong with this. It's just a seagull, and it's a plain old background. So why does it look so bad? Well, the situation in reality is pretty complex, and I'd bore you to death if I were to explain everything in detail. And also, you shouldn't ask a neuroscientist, because if they were to explain things, they'd bore you to death even more. So, I'll take things from here, and I'll make them kind of simple for you, and touch on a few key points that you could use to address your art. First things first, our retinas, the thing that we use to detect light from the environment, are made up of millions upon millions of these cells called on-center bipolar cells. So, what do? As you can see, there's a center region and a surrounding region. The center region I've denoted with a plus sign, and the surrounding region I've denoted with a negative sign. What does this mean? If we shine light onto the center region of the on-center bipolar cell, we get a very strong positive response. In contrast, if we shine light evenly across the entire on-center bipolar cell, we'll get no response. And if we preferentially shine light on the surrounding, we'll get a very strong negative response. So what's happening here? Well, what the on-center bipolar cell is doing is finding the difference in brightness between the center and the surroundings. So if there's relatively no difference, then we'll get no response. And if the brightness is higher in the center, then we'll get a very strong positive response. Now, that's not quite the end of the story, as you probably might have guessed. There's also off-center bipolar cells. As you probably might have guessed, these work in the exact opposite way, where I denoted the center with a negative sign and the surrounding with a positive sign. So if we were to shine a bright light on the surrounding area, we would get a very strong positive response. Now, what does this actually mean? Well, having millions upon millions of these cells on our retina means we can do some pretty nifty things. For starters, we can detect edges. This is very useful when we're going about our day-to-day lives because we can separate where an object starts and when the same object ends and another starts. It also helps us discern patterns. The next thing we can do is discern directionality. This is very useful because we can see and group lines that move in the same direction, and again, use it to identify objects. Lastly, it helps us to identify contrast within an image. Contrast could be any time where the brightness changes from dark to bright, or even when there's just a color change. Again, very useful. You have it. You have the secret sauce. You think you can go into your room, try your hand again, and create your perfect masterpiece. Not quite. I'm sorry to disappoint. We're still missing a very big piece of the puzzle. All we talked about so far was very low-level processing. I mean, sure, it's complicated, but all we're really talking about is how the light lands on our retina and gets sent to our brain. We didn't talk about what our brain does, and if you know anything, the brain kind of does a lot. Again, to talk about higher-level processing, I would probably bore you to death, and I'm not here to spend hours, I only have 5 minutes. Again, if you were to ask a neuroscientist, they'd bore you to death. So I'll keep it very simple, and I'll touch on a very few important things that you could keep in mind to improve your artwork. All right, so what can we keep in mind? We like novelty. Our brains love it. So if we have the option to pick between looking at the same old boring object that we've seen time and time again, or a really cool new novel object, we're going to want to look at that new novel object preferentially. So how can we take this into account when we're looking at our art? Let's go back. Right now, what do we have? We have a plain old seagull on a plain white background. What's the first thing that jumps out at you? Probably not a whole lot. And that's because the background and the seagull kind of blend in together. They're both white. So let's make the background black. All of a sudden, the subject pops. And we think, wow. Our eyes are instantly drawn to the seagull, and we're thinking, yeah, we're on the right track. All right, let's add some edges and some directionality. By adding a checkerboard floor, our eyes are drawn up to the subject, and there's so much more visual intrigue, so many more signals getting sent up to our brains. Now, obviously, as we talked about, the amount of signal getting sent to our brains is probably not the only thing to look at. So let's focus on higher level processing. How can we make this piece that much more novel? How can we make it so much more thought-provoking that the average audience would just stand in awe? Let's make the seagull blue. And now all of a sudden, we can check our progress. We went from the boring old piece of art that we had, with no edges, no directionality, no contrast, and barely any novelty, to this new wonderful piece of art that has all of these characteristics. And now we can finally show it off. This is the thing that we can display in the art museums, and people will remember us by for 1,000 years. Thank you.